Hello, you're back with Dave and Tim at the single malt review. Now, many moons ago, I looked at Dewar's white label, an unpretentious and very widely available blended Scotch whisky. Today, it's something very similar, but a bit more upmarket.
Going up the Dewar's ladder a little bit from the absolutely ubiquitous, especially if you're in America, white label, to the, I think, distinctly more exciting 15 years old, which is quite a weird age for really any whiskey. I think Glenfarclas, I should say, they do a 15, but not many people really do. Odd year there, sort of sandwiched in between the 12 and the 18, far more common. Not that Dewar's doesn't do a 12 and the 18, but I think this one is a little bit more exciting than both of them. Dewar's owned these days by Bacardi, who has a smattering of this and that whisky-wise, but Dewar's as their main holding. This was one of their more recent expressions, invented by their current master blender, a lady by the name of something that completely escapes me, but one of their more recent things at any rate, and I think something really pretty dynamic, and we'll try and get into exactly why. Quite commonly frequenting travel retail, where this bottle will have spent some portion of its life before I managed to sort of get hold of it as a lot. But
at least in this part of the world, you don't find a lot of giant 1 litre bottles on retail shelves.
1 litre usually tells you where it came from, and where it came from is very, very often duty free. So anyway, this, I think, though, is a Australasian bottle. I don't see any funny duty stamps or foreign writing on the back. So anyway, never mind. That's not really what's important. What is important is the whisky itself. And as I said, I think this is really rather pretty good for a blend. As for what we'll be looking for, there's really only one thing I know about Dewar's, only one Dewar's fact, and that's that the predominant single malt whisky that forms the heart malt of the blend is Aberfeldy, and that we've never tried in its pure form, but it's as far as I know a very, very blend appropriate. I think it's a Speyside malt, but it's sort of very, very blendable, you would say, quite a neutral, quite a sort of a light and easy type of whisky. So that's what we'll be looking for in here, but hopefully with just a little more nuance than that.
When I looked at Dewar's white label, I didn't give it a fantastic score, I'll be honest about that. But what I did feel is that if the whisky component, as opposed to the grain spirit, could be more expressive, we had more of that whisky, then you'd have something really quite special. The underlying whisky flavour was really quite good. It was just sort of overwhelmed by the grain, which was bulking up the blend.
You might be in luck here, because I think there is probably quite a little bit more malt whisky going on
in
here.
fact, there is nothing less than 15 years old in the whisky component. That should hopefully bring it more to the fore. Let's find out.
So there's nothing too stand out on the nose. There is a lot of honey, really quite a lot of honey. Quite light, heathery honey, very sort of Speyside Highland there in its character. There is a lot of caramel. It's not particularly fruity. It's not particularly spicy. It's a very, very bourbon-dominant nose. There's
quite a prickle to it. There's a fair bit of heat for something that's only 40%.
There is quite a bit of heat. It's still a pretty hot day on this particular shoot we're doing. It's damn near 30 degrees centigrade. So everything we're trying has got a slightly sort of fumey edge to it, and it is fairly keen for a 40% whisky, but it's not too bad for me. Certainly isn't covering anything up, which is sort of an ensemble of bourbon characters. As I said, we've got vanilla, caramel, coconut, lots of white oak.
Honey and some nuts.
A lot of honey. Honey kind of going along with all the other qualifiers. There's sort of honey involved. There's honey nuts, honey vanilla, honey oak.
The very raw kind of spiritus trait too, an aspect which I think is resulting from the high grain alcohol.
Very, very likely. And that plus the heat. So let's see what's on the palate.
Initial prickles and flavours of grain, but underneath that, There's those honey, oats, and nuts. Other bourbon-influenced characters, a bit of vanilla, some dried fruit.
It's a whiskey that sort of warms up and builds a bit of complexity on the way. Initially, it's quite, not maybe hugely prickly, but it's quite youthful. At first glance, it's quite useful, quite fresh, quite keen and hard-edged. But once it comes into the mid-palate, it softens quite dramatically, and then gradually expands into not a great deal more than a retelling of the nose. It's still definitely dominated by honey, by nuts, by vanilla, and by that bourbon wood. Although the back of the bottle does claim that there is sherry wood involved, I think that it is in the minority. I would say that quite confidently.
I'm getting a fair bit of tropical fruit midway through the taste explosion.
Midway
it
and
kind of
towards the
expands,
end,
blossoms out a bit into some bananas, some guava, pineapple.
there is a sort of a tropical mango-y thing going on, and a little bit of tinned fruit on the end as well. Sort of a tinned pineapple, tinned fruit salad.
To me, that is fairly evocative of a relatively strong sherry influence. So I'd expect there's quite a bit in there. But the finish, though, I think is where the grain alcohol reasserts itself and perhaps tends to overwhelm. But it's got a slightly artificial taste to it. That finish is a bit off-putting.
It's hard to. I'm trying to see if I can form into words exactly what's on the finish. It's, as I say, it starts out not raw but quite keen-edged, and it ends in a similar track. That fieriness, that sort of youthful quality comes back out, and that probably is the grain alcohol at that point, because at 15 years you'd expect that things would be, at least as far as the malt was concerned, beginning to calm down. You would hope after all that time, but there is a fairly keen edge to the back end. I don't find it necessarily unpleasant because it does come along with these lovely tinned fruit characters. It just makes them maybe a little more difficult to really grasp than they would otherwise be. It's a whiskey that is fairly versatile. For 40%, it will take water, which is maybe not unheard of, but it's fairly uncommon. It's not a fragile whiskey. That youthful character, though it may interfere with some of the more subtle aspects of the flavour, it means it will stand up to going below 40%.
I've added some water
which
now.
Will kill some other whiskies. I am wont to be, as this is a blend and as this is a very hot day. I'm going to be a very, very naughty person and put a ice cube in here. Well, that was the plan. Let's just... Hopefully you're going to hear any breaking glass here, but... there we go. That was the plan all along. I shall remember that in future. Small ice cubes for these glasses. This, I think, will be just the ticket for me today.
Yeah, well, water has mellowed it somewhat and is smoothing some of those rougher edges, including the grain alcohol.
Now that wicked is the thing that was to do, and it certainly has simplified the whiskey. That has just turned it into one hell of a drink for a hot day.
In fact, can I purloin that remaining ice cube?
You certainly may.
Let's see how this goes for me.
Hopefully it's no larger than mine, or we might have some real problems here. It turns it into, from a scotch that was maybe slightly less approachable, into something really, really deeply refreshing. That
is good.
That fresh fruit is still there, but that what was a slightly harsh, youthful thing has been turned right around, and it's now a refreshing, youthful thing. It's really very, very different. This is a really, really good example, I think, of a whiskey that will embrace an ice cube. It won't worry too much about it.
As before, I feel this would be just a really, really good blended malt whiskey. If you could take the grain away and just have it as pure malt.
Sadly,
really good.
I think that you could say that about almost all blends. Almost all blends would be so much more interesting were they blended or vatted malts rather than rather than true blends with the majority of grain whiskey. But then once you remove that, there goes the whole financial incentive for making blends in the first place.
Very sure those kinds of blends do exist, and they're all very good. But also, you do
They
you
are
feel it in the wallet when you
very different products, and they come at a very different price. But never mind, they are, I think, becoming slightly more popular, and there are cheap ones for people that want to have a look. Monkey Shoulder, made by the Glenfiddich people. That's probably a good place as any to start if you're interested in that. It's not really my thing. It's a bit young for me, but it's certainly recommendable as a very, very entry-level vatted malt. Won't cost you a lot of money. As for this, scores-wise, blend scores, this is, despite its shortcomings, it is one of the better blends I've tried recently. We don't try a lot of blends here. We should probably try more of them, really, given their prevalence. And I'm certain I say this every time, and then we go and proceed to
we've had some great recommendations for blends that we've been looking
things
out for in our comments in recent times. So got my eye open for those. Thank you for suggesting them. I'll keep looking.
This one I think is fairly strong. As far as I'm concerned, this one is a 78 for me. What are your thoughts?
I'll go slightly lower. This one rates a 72 from me. It is a vast improvement on the white label. So it's obviously, you can taste it's related. It's of the same family, but it's got so many more strengths. The older whiskey is really contributing to it. Lovely range of flavours too. If you have it to boil on its own with little water, or the rather radical transformation that comes from chilling it slightly on a hot day. This is a great idea. So it's good. It's enjoyable. It's fruity. It's complex. It's still hindered by being a grain-heavy blend. I don't know what percentage is grain or anything, just that it's quite a heavy element to the overall flavour profile, so that drags it down a bit. But at the same time, you know what you're getting with a blended whiskey, you know you're getting that grain, and you know what pluses and minuses that's going to have. So it's honest about it, it's an upfront, good, a good blend of a good age on it too, so it's, I wouldn't say it's not a recommendation.
I think without extraneously testing the Dewar's 12 and 18, I think this is quite a happy medium, considering that it's very, very reasonably priced. I don't know why this one is quite so good as it is price-wise, at least down in this part of the world, but it's still a very good one to pick up if you want to blend with significantly more without getting into the increasingly savage price range of the 18 years and above.
I would say this is an excellent intermediary step between the really affordable, really available blends and the sort of less affordable, less accessible, but sort of higher quality single malt whiskies. This is a really good in-between step. So if you want to balance quality, flavour, affordability and availability, then yeah, definitely go for it.
So, that's Dewar's 15. We will, as I say every time before we go and go down a massive esoteric whiskey hole with strange unavailable stuff, I'll say once again, we should do more blends, so I will try and remember that and pull a few more out in the coming times. So look for all that and more in the coming episodes. Keep safe in the meantime. Slanja, this has been the Single Malt Review. Thank you once again for tuning in.